Welcome to 7 Minute Politics. I'm your host, Charlie McCauley, and today we're going to look at a global crisis, climate change. So here we go. I went to the University of Texas, and the very first graduate program I was ever a part of, I was studying kinesiology and sports science, and I took this kind of full body metric test. And a really surprising thing happened. I tested my flexibility and muscle strength and all these things, but they also tested my lung capacity. And I actually failed that part of the test because I took the test wrong, but I didn't know that at the time. And the person who gave me the test said, "Are you a heavy smoker?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Did you grow up in a city?" And I said, "No." And then we realized that I had taken the test wrong, but it stuck with me that growing up in a city would be similar to being a heavy smoker. The reason I bring that up is because pollution is a huge problem for our entire globe, and you probably already know that. And it's directly related to climate change, but also climate justice. And one thing that's fascinating to me about the word climate change is it sets alarm bells off for people politically and partisan and all those things. And it really shouldn't, because it's a global problem and it's something that's actually not that complicated and one that we need to be very united on. But before we talk about that, because one thing we know from neurobiology is that we're actually not very good about looking or forecasting into the future and caring about what happens even 20 or 30 years from now. It seems like a long time away. Pollution right now is a huge problem. Did you know that according to the World Health Organization, this year and almost every year, approximately 7 million people will die of pollution? That's air pollution, that's asthma attacks, that's cancer that's caused by carcinogens in the air, but it's also really unethical climate justice behaviors. Those are American companies that export lead batteries because of our environmental protections that won't let us put lead near children. They'll export those down near Mexico City, and children on playgrounds are 5 times higher to have lead poisoning because we export our lead to them. We put power plants across the border from San Diego and Tijuana, and those kids experience pollution. We continue, because of our colonizing past, to not listen to indigenous people when they say, "We don't want the South Dakota Access Pipeline to run through our indigenous lands," and then we have 2 oil spills after that. The Syrian war, in part, is caused by climate change, and pollution kills all the time. We buy shirts from Walmart that the dye was put in that shirt in a sweatshop in Bangladesh, and the dye is then poured in the river, and children die downstream. The thing about climate injustice is that it's an unfair and sickening issue. The poor of the world in the globe disproportionately suffer from the wealthy and the rich in the global north, who are the mass pollutants out there. Now, that's just pollution that kills. None of us want dirty air. None of us want dirty water. We want a clean earth and ethical behaviors. But what about climate change itself in the long term? Why is it that it's such a political issue when 97% of climate scientists in the world, an overwhelming consensus in a scientific community, agree that it's anthropogenic, which means it's man-caused by the Industrial Revolution and our production and burning of fossil fuels, methane, and the farming industries. It's human-caused, and it's a threat to not only animal extinctions, but our own species as the planet warms. Now, many people say, "Well, I just don't believe in science. The 3% might be right." There's some truth to that, I guess. But science is good because it changes its mind over time. And where the evidence lies, most of us actually believe the experts. Here's my example I give all the time. If you go to the doctor and they scan your chest and they find that you have a mass, and they do a biopsy and they say you have lung cancer, and here's what 97% of cancer doctors say you have and what you should do about it. In that moment, you would probably find out that you do believe in what experts in science say. The same logic should apply to our beloved and beautiful planet. But how do they know? It's actually really, really simple, and it's not partisan. Global temperatures have been measured for over 150 years, and we can see a trend of warming temperatures. But geological climate scientists can see in rings of trees and in ice cores. Ice cores are very similar to a ring of a tree. You just go straight down through in Greenland, Antarctica, pull up, and there's these layers year by year, and you can measure how much carbon or methane or carbon monoxide is in that ice. We have very easy data to map and see the trajectory. In fact, what we know is that the Earth has been cooling for 6,000 to 7,000 years until the Industrial Revolution, and it is skyrocketing in the last 40 years. We know that because the sea level is rising. And so my plea to you is to understand that thermometers are not Democrats or Republicans, and sea level measurements are not Democrats or Republicans, and ice core measurements are not Democrats or Republicans. And maybe most beautifully and haunting, NASA at the Goddard Station Administration, they launched a satellite called the OCO2 that has a spectrometer on it. I love spectrometers because I love astronomy, and we know that elements in their light, they cast a kind of signature in their light spectrum, and a spectrometer can see the elements. And we use it all the time looking at distant stars, but NASA has been looking at the Earth with a spectrometer and creating time lapses where we can actually watch with our own eyes the global north producing carbon, as you can see right here, and I'm going to link to these things down below too. And then you can watch as summertime comes throughout the year and the lungs of the Earth, the deciduous forests and the conifers of Canada and Russia breathe in the oxygen and photosynthesis. And then in the wintertime, the carbon just keeps growing again in the reds and the yellows. And it just keeps getting worse. And the temperatures are getting worse. And 5 of the last 10 years have been the hottest in recorded history. And something that really impacts me is this year was the hottest in recorded history. But what we know from climate change science is that this is also the coolest year in the next 100 years. It's going to keep getting worse. I've been really impacted by the IPCC report. This is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I'm not sure how many C's I said there, but these are the top scientists in the world. And every 2 years, they put out a thorough thing that all of you can go read for yourselves and investigate. So what do we do about this threat? Because the IPCC report tells us the trajectory we're on is extreme heat days and massive death, mass extinction of animals, which we're already seeing at alarming rates in the ocean and elsewhere, and we have to act to save our economy, to save our health. There's things we can do individually, but politically is bigger what our governments do. If you're in America and you're voting now in the current time watching this video, one party, the Democratic Party, is committed to the reality of climate science and has multiple ideas about how to mitigate and change drastically our future, where the other party denies its existence in their actual platform. And they're also bought out by big oil and coal so that they are trying to actually subsidize the fossil fuel industry to continue to destroy our planet. It's a major political issue. I want you to educate yourself. Check out the links below. Make sure if you like this video, click subscribe or share it with somebody else. Thanks for listening, and I hope it starts a great conversation.